All right, so hello everyone, and welcome to our research video on whistling languages, where we'll be taking a look at whistling languages as a case study to show or to bridge the gap between language and music. And so in order to do this, we'll be trying to answer the research question, are there alternative types of evolved communication in vocal learners? So in this case, we'll be looking at humans and birds that show that language and music are not fully distinct. And so in order to widen the evolutionary scope of our analysis, we'll also be comparing this human capacity to produce whistling languages to birdsong in birds. In doing so, we'll highlight some interesting evolutionary commonalities between the two. And we also hope that in answering this research question, that we will be able to make more room for musicality within our current understanding of language. And so the debate we're taking part in concerns the degree to which music and language are distinct. And we take the view that they're actually more closely intertwined than what is traditionally assumed under a more modular view of music and languages. So something along the lines of views scholars like Chomsky and Pinker. And so just sort of to start off, we have an example of one specific whistling language, which is Silbo. And so we'll just let you hear like a short exchange in Silbo just to get an idea for what it actually sounds like when someone speaks a whistling language. Yeah, so that's basically what it sounds like. And so, whoops. Yeah, so when comparing music and language, at first glance, it might seem like they have very different properties, and as such that they would be very different and difficult to compare. However, we believe that our case study, so whistling languages, show that they can in fact be combined, and that this is in fact a phenomenon that is difficult to explain under the assumption that music and language are fully distinct. And moving on.
All right, and here we have some background information on what exactly whistling languages are. Silbo is just one of the many language examples, but it is expected that over 50 other languages have a whistled equivalent and just have not yet been studied. Evolved out of their regional counterpart, verbal counterpart, whistled languages share similarities within linguistic structures like vocabulary, grammar, and prosody. Additionally, whistled languages are a part of cultural transmission, like music, and are often used in ceremonies to mimic talking instruments, such as flutes, guitars, and harps. And then in the next slide, we are in support of our debate that music and language are not fully distinct because we have found it relevant to highlight how whistling languages blur the lines between the two. Whistling languages are proof that humans have an evolved capacity for transferring language into a way that is both musical and linguistic through bihemispheric usage. While whistled languages act independently from both language and music, studies have shown bilateralization of the hemispheres in the brain, and that when a language is whistled, left hemispheric dominance dramatically decreases. As you can see in the image, whistled languages also utilize almost equally the right hemisphere, which is predominantly where we would find melodic perception. So in relation to bihemispheric usage in whistling languages, we found this concept to be similar to the neural sharing hypothesis in the ways music and language share resources within cognitive functions. Whistling languages have musical and linguistic characteristics while forming independently from both phenomena. This in turn makes whistling languages perceivable as a almost musical language prototype.
Now we will move from the brain representation to a broader and evolutionary point of view. In the next few minutes, I will draw a comparison between whistling language, the interesting but not typical linguistic form, and birdsong, namely how birds talk. Here on the right part of the slide, you can see two spectrograms. The upper one is a spectrogram of a piece of birdsong produced by zebra finch, and the other one is a sentence produced in mixteco with whistling language. Please note that zebrafinch bird song is actually relatively simple comparing with its bird peers. And many birds, other birds can produce even more complex songs. Simply by looking at these two spectrograms, you will immediately notice that both vocal learners communicate by changing the frequency of their sounds. This leads us to the first similarity. Next slide, please. Namely, the way of communication. As suggested by Philippi in his article, birds are good at changing the shape of their vocal tract to produce differences in frequency. And we humans also do the same, so that we produce various different sounds that carry differences in meanings. Secondly, as many other typical forms of languages, whistling languages work in different domains, including lexicon, grammar, and especially prosody. As pointed out by Philippi, many primates, non-primates, and birds are also able to produce emotional prosodies, and these birds include chickens, galus, and much more. Thirdly, whistling languages and bird songs also share similarities in their social functions, especially on courtship. The function of bird song in courtship has been heavily studied, but similar functions also appear among whistling language speakers. For example, the Hmong people who live in the Himalayan area use whistling language for the purpose of courtship. And finally, on a genetic level, there is also a shared gene by bird and human speech learners, which is the four-cat box protein P2, in abbreviation FOXP2, which plays an important role in bird sound and human vocal learning. This gene has been found in both human and birds, and this genetic similarity between bird song and human language again support the view that music and language are not fully distinct, as we previously might think.
Yeah, so just to briefly conclude, we argued that human whistling languages are a form of communication that encodes information entirely in musical stimuli, such as melody and rhythm, and that it does so to a more significant extent than speech. And we believe that this form of communication is analogous to birdsong in terms of its acoustics, but also perhaps in terms of its wider social function. And then finally, we believe that the existence of these modes of communication indicates that there are evolved alternatives to speech that do not support a rigid dichotomy between music and language. And so, of course, while whistling languages themselves are based on pre-existing languages and are therefore arguably not independently evolved per se, we believe that it is still true that our capacity for producing and understanding these quasi-musical languages is. And so with that, we also have some ideas for future research that could sort of enhance some of the work that is already done in the field. We believe that it could benefit from more physiological comparisons. So for example, by comparing and contrasting vocalization processes across species. And it could also benefit from more pragmatic comparisons. So for example, studying the variability in pragmatics across different songbird species. And these are our references. And with that, we would also like to thank you for watching our video.